So I asked you to list as many organs on a tree that you can. Structure, same thing. That's what they are, right? So, well, they're organs. Leaves are organs. Trunk, branches, leaves, fruit, roots. Those are all organs of a tree. You know? Chlorophyll is a chemical, not that's a part though, for sure. You know? Which chlorophyll? You didn't tell me which one, A or B. A. See what? See, I see you. I see chlorophyll. It's green. Leaf, bark, stoma, ovary. Yep. Part of the apple. Seeds, spores, roots, phloem. Yeah, xylem and phloem. Flowers, trunk. Vascular tissue. Yep, xylem and phloem, the vascular tissue of trees, plants in general. See if there's anything different. Bark, like a dog. Yep. Seeds. My dog's getting so big. Oh, my gosh. We bought a Burmese mountain dog over the summer. He's going to be 180 pounds. Like, no joke. Big dog. Yeah, they are big teddy bears. Except he thinks he's like weighs 2 pounds. He just lays on you. Comes over and like lays on you, knocks you over, and you're like, "Jeez, man." It's bigger than that. Way bigger. Almost twice that size. Oh, yep, spores, seeds, thylakoids. I like thylakoids. That's a good one. Membranous thylakoid. Right? Stoma, cuticle. Very good. Leave. Someone read the chapter. Or copy and pasted. Chloroplasm. Woolly bear, yep, tardigrades are on the bark, but not part of the tree itself. All right. So today we're here to talk, or start talking about this very, very large and important chapter about plants. Okay, it is the main chapter where we will deal with the internal physiology of plants, the evolution of plants, and the different types of plants. But the green algal ancestors of plants is where we need to start because one of the underlying themes of AP biology is evolution, and yes, we need to apply it to everything, including our plant friends. Where did they come from? What? Big ideas? Yeah, it's wonderful. So plants are multicellular photosynthetic eukaryotes. Plant evolution is marked by adaptations to a land existence, and a land environment offers certain advantages, including plentiful light for photosynthesis, and carbon dioxide is present in higher concentrations and diffuses more readily in the air than in water. Okay, so two good things for plants on land. That's why, plants grow on land better. It's because there's CO2 readily available, and you have lots of light. There's not that whole, those different zones of the ocean that block out everything but UV light, right? So if I were to ask you, which bacteria are our plant friends closely related to, what would you tell me? Which bacteria are our plant friends closely related to on the grand evolutionary scheme of things? Think phylogenetically. Think cladistically. You hear how nerdy I sound now? You guys are going to be like, but the scary thing is you understand it, so, right? Yeah. That means you learn something. If you get my jokes and my nonsense, you know biology. Right? Right, yeah. That's a good thing, kind of. Yeah, if you're laughing at my jokes, you're ready for the AP exam. Right? I don't know if that's a legitimate. Yay, cyanobacteria. I was looking for cyanobacteria. Very good. How do you got it? E. coli. All right. So adaptations are required for a land environment. We understand to get from water to land, there must be this in-betweener stage. There's a constant threat of desiccation or drying out. So a plant drying out is desiccating. And it protects all phases of reproduction, sperm, egg, embryo, from drying out. And yes, plants have sperm, plants have egg, and they have embryos. Can anybody tell me what plant sperm is called? What is plant sperm called? I just had serious deja vu. You ever get that? Like, big time. It was on that last slide when I read, what did I read? I read this line, constant threat of desiccation and drying out, and I had deja vu, and I had like an out-of-body experience there where it was like watching myself read that at a different moment in my life. Creeped me out. So please tell me what plant sperm is called. And don't tell me green tadpole. I think someone put that last year. Hey, pollen, right? Very good. Yeah. Pollen. Oh, dear Lord. All right. So the water environment provides plentiful water and support for the body of the plant. Now, seed plants disperse their embryos within the seed, which provides the embryo with food within a protective seed coat. So a seed essentially is what? What is a seed? Let's see how biologically you're thinking today. What is a seed by my definition? What would I call a seed? What would I call a seed? See what you guys are putting. Zygote, there it is. Yep. So a seed, something has already happened, right? You got a little fertilization, you get a little growth going on there. Before it's a seed, it's an ovary, waiting for sperm, right? Or our green tadpole, or our pollen, right? There's no such thing as a green tadpole. Do not put that on your AP exam. Well, there is a green tadpole, but it's not anything to do with a plant. Okay, that's in the animal kingdom, right? Amphibious. So, what happened? Oh, you're not done with that one yet? We did that one. I did read them out of order. I read the bottom and the top. I'm sorry. So this watery environment that plants need is not just so that they can drink from the bottom and bring in water, which is essential for all metabolic processes, but it's also in that female organ that sticks up from the flower that accepts the pollen. Pollen is sperm. Sperm need to what? Swim, right? So they need water. Hard to swim without water, right? It completely negates having a flagellum. Right? So to conserve water, the land plant body is covered by a waxy cuticle. So that's one of the very important structures that plants have. They have the ability to retain the water that they bring in. Well, that sounds great. We should do that. We should just coat ourselves with wax, okay? There's a movie where they did that to everybody. House of Wax, yeah, that's what I was saying. But what's the problem? Why can't we do that? Why can't humans just coat ourselves with wax? Why? Why don't we have wax on parts of our body. Why aren't we just covered in wax? What would happen to us if we were covered in wax? Yeah, you can't release heat. So, you ever see those movies where they got, what's the one girl, the ex-girl, the one that they paint, she got a lot of latex paint on her? What's the name of that one? Is that her name? I meant the character, not her. Mystique, that was it, yeah. So they paint her in that latex coating, and I watched a show on that, and they have a really hard time because they can't leave that on her very long because her skin has to breathe, right? So plants, they've got to breathe too. And that's kind of why I was getting at that. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But vascular systems transport water in the body of the land plants, and plants are thought to have evolved from freshwater or green algae about 450 million years ago. Now, we will talk about how CO2 gets through that cuticle layer in just a little bit. There's special structures, especially on leaves, that allow them to do that. So, gosh, we're like 4.5 million years old. Plants are 4.4 450 million years old. So they're way older than us, right? Just think about it. Super old. They're 100 times older than us. That's why they're bigger. That's why they can do things like photosynthesis and respiration, right? They are way more evolved than we are. Think about it. I hope. I want to do something different. Yeah, I want to be Superman. I want to just fly to the sun and suck in some nuclear energy and be good. Right? What? Yeah, and they stand there like, yeah, they're called crazy people. They live in Los Angeles. Some of them do that. What's that thing called? Scientology? With Tom Cruise and John Travolta. All right, so, right, they're nuts. They believe that some alien came here. And, yeah, right. Yeah, I won't get into that, but there's some people are crazy. We'll just say that. All right. So if you look at the grand scheme of all of the plants that we have today in a nice phylogenetic cladogram, and you drop back, you have to eventually get back to a common ancestor, which in this case is the common green algal ancestor. And it has to be the green algae. There's different types of algae. There's brown algae, there's red algae, but it has to be green. Why does it have to be green algae? Why? Why does it have to be green algae? Why can't it be brown algae? Trees have brown in them, right? There's bark. Why does it have to be green algae? Green is the color of life. It needs, chloroplast. There it is. So part of that endosymbiotic theory with both the mitochondrion and the chloroplast is those chloroplasts, they use chlorophyll A. Well, they use chlorophyll B too, but and accessory pigments. But you have to have the ability to collect certain wavelengths of life and reflect others, right? What's the one color that plants really do not use? What's the one color that plants don't use? Which wavelength of light do they really not use? Quit looking at your neighbor for the answer. I'm going to put you on an island over there. You quit. Yeah, I know. Put your own answer in. It's a color. Pick one. Roy G. Biv. Which one? So black. Black is not a wavelength. So really funny. They love red and blue wavelengths. They don't want green, right? That's what's bouncing off them. It's kind of weird when you think it's like, oh yeah, they don't want that. Yeah. So like the one color plants that like we affiliate with plants, they actually don't use. That's what they're getting rid of. They're reflecting that, right? It's like, I know, isn't that weird? It makes you really think about it. It's like, huh? Yeah. So we got like Roy G. Biv, right? Okay. So I will tell you, there's different pigments, and I know you know this on plants, but if you absorb, like, let's say these and reflect everything above it, okay, if you're reflecting green and you're absorbing blue, indigo, and violet, we'll say, then you know you're going to look like you're green, right? That make sense? So what happens in the fall? We get rid of chlorophyll, right? And what do we start to see? They're there all along. You just can't see them because green actually overpowers them. It's a shorter wavelength. Okay? I know we talked about that a little bit in biology, but if you didn't have it, just to bring it up, you know, in the fall you do see yellows, oranges, and reds because they're longer wavelengths, right, than this shorter green one. The shorter green one is overpowering them all year round. I'm sorry, what? That's part of why you see sunsets too, yep. At certain times of day, the weaker wavelengths are able to be seen because in the day you get all of them, right? And that's white light. And then the other ones are filtered out by particles in the atmosphere. So like pollution helps sunsets look really pretty. It's true. I did not say that. I don't. You know me in art. I don't really care about it, so no. I shouldn't say that. I just recorded myself saying I don't like art. I meant Arthur, this guy I knew in high school, because he was a bully. All right. Art, yes, that art guy. No, I like music. I know. Of course I like art. I'm just not good at it. But I can play the piano. I don't know. So land plants are most closely related to freshwater green algae known as charophytes. Now, charophytes and land plants are in the same clade, or cladistic, and their common ancestor no longer exists. So it's like the missing link of plants. Kind of like, where's the hominid? Well, it's not here anymore. Okay. The hominid of the plant world. So characteristics are common between charophytes and land plants. Cellulose for cell walls. Apical cells, that means surface cells. They have a surface. And plasmodesmata, which we'll talk about. And they do have a placenta, which retains and cares for the zygote. What, Mr. Mason? Plants have a placenta? Yes. They have ovaries and eggs, just like people do. Well, not just, but we're going to dissect plants, or flowers, I should say, which is the most sexual organ out of pretty much any organism on the planet, because it has both male and female parts. Okay? That's why they call it the birds and the bees, you know. So that leads to this whole thing called alternation of generations. This is probably one of the most confusing things in biology when I start mentioning it, because I don't have time to get into it as much in general biology. But if I am alternating my generations, that basically means I'm spending half my time as diploid and half my time as haploid. And when I say half, it's not a perfect half, right? Part of it here and part of it there, but close to half. So the life cycle involves alternating between haploid and diploid, where your multicellular one-end individuals as a gametophyte is produced, and then you turn into multicellular two-end diploid individuals in a sporophyte form. Then the multicellular two-end individuals, the sporophytes, produce multicellular one-end individuals as gametophytes, and then that whole thing starts over again. What is an example of a multicellular two-end sporophyte, please? What is an example of a multicellular two-end sporophyte? You will not look at things the same after today. You'll be calling things all different names as you drive down the road. Quit looking at your neighbor, Ryan. Do your own work. Put that microscope between you and him, Lindsay. Pull that thing. Pull it forward. You quit checking yourself. Have some confidence. She can't help you on the AP exam. There you go. There you go. See what we're coming up with here. Trees. Yeah, that's good. Ferns a little bit. We'll get into ferns are in their own little world. We'll talk about that later. Pine trees for sure, yep. So trees and plants basically. But you look at a giant pine tree, that is a multicellular sporophyte, diploid cells. It's like saying we're full of these diploid body cells, okay? Except we call that whole thing a sporophyte. Tree, 100-foot tall, white pine tree, sporophyte, okay? What type of sporophyte is that? White pine sporophyte. So the sporophyte is 2N. It's a multicellular individual that produces spores by meiosis. Okay? I'm with that. That's how we make ours, right? Well, not our spores, but we make our gametes, sperm and egg like that. Now a spore is a haploid cell that will become the gametophyte. So it's not quite a gamete yet. Now once that spore is produced and it becomes a gametophyte, the multicellular individual that produces gametes is what we're talking about as it matures. Now the gametes fuse in fertilization to form the zygote, and this is where the birds and the bees come in. And the zygote is a diploid cell that will become the sporophyte again. And then that divides through mitosis and becomes this giant tree, right? Or one layer at a time. That makes sense if you think about it. So let's talk about trees, because you guys have probably made it to this point in your life, and you think about trees as an organism. You think of them as being multicellular. But what we really don't think about a lot is how they actually reproduce. I think generally we get it, but a pine tree is a good way to look at trees because it doesn't have like a very visible flower all the time. It does flower, okay, but in a different way. So we have this tree. It grows up. We know it divides. Every year you get a new ring on a tree, right? What else do you get every year? What else do you get every year on a tree? Any tree. What do you get every year on a tree? This should be stuff that was mentioned maybe back in middle school. So this is going to be back a ways. Okay, the rings we talked about. What else? Yeah, they get another layer of sporophytes. That's kind of like the ring on the tree. The megaspores. They get every year they get another female megaspore, another male microspore. I'm looking for something specific. New leaves. I like that. They do get new leaves. So let's talk about new leaves because turn over a new leaf here. Okay. Sorry. So there's one very bad leaf, okay? So this is going to fall off, right? Every year. So fall happens. And then the next year we get another one, right? So that means you get a new leaflet, right? And a new portion of the stem off of a new bud every year. Are we good there? Okay. Back on the tree. That's the tree. Whoa. Okay, back on the tree. This is really bad. Okay, here. So every year you get a new stem as well on the top. So you're not just growing out on each stem, you're also growing a new one at the very top. So you look at the tops of pine trees, right, and they're getting this new growth constantly growing up and up and up and up and up and out and out and out and out and out. That's why the base of a pine tree is what compared to the top? Yeah, let's talk about Christmas, right? You may get your Christmas trees. You guys know how much I love Christmas. If we're going to do, that's another reason to like Christmas. So, oops, and I cannot draw a Christmas tree to save my life. What's wrong with me here? So, yeah, but it is a triangle, right? Yeah, we'll do this. I cannot draw today, or ever. This is it. Oh, oh no. All right. I should have just gone up to the board for that. You can tell one side of my brain is very different than the other, right? I mean, this is me. Like this is like the male brain. You can just like divide it down the middle. That's not even the middle, right? Oh dear. Oh, that's why they make tools like this for people like me, right? It's like, okay, yep, now you can do it. Okay. All right. So. Oh, my word. I am bad at that. So that is scary because that is the difference between my right and my left brain if you really knew the science behind it. Like one side is able to be used, the other one is like, you're not creative, stop. Okay? And so this is the one that felt right, just so you know, and this is the one that was like, what are you trying to do here? And anyway. So if we look at this, we notice the bottom is way wider than the top. That's because new growth is happening here for the first time, right? This is still growing out, and we don't think of like pine trees as growing out at the base, but they are. Okay, so they're growing out and up. What happened? That was modern art. Yeah, yeah. That's what if you name your baby Art, that's what he is. Modern art. Because he's new. Sorry. So we start off as this big sporophyte. Think of that as a giant pine tree, right? Big old sporophyte. Okay. And they are going to produce sporangium, which then will divide through meiosis. Think of this as germ cells breaking apart in like meiosis 1 and meiosis 2. As this occurs, they make spore. Think of those as sperm and egg in a way. Okay? Now, imagine if I added a step in our spermatogenesis and our oogenesis where after you made sperm, they started dividing on their own. Okay? So imagine now a sperm in your head. I know you guys, I'm not going to draw one, but you can imagine how bad my drawing would be. And so you had a sperm, and imagine that sperm like starts going through almost binary fission and splitting in two. Think of it like that in a way. And now you get bundles of these self-dividing sperms. You got the sperm that you made, spores in this case, that are now dividing. And we're going to listen to, this is going to be a really weird YouTube video today. Just fast forward this part if you're listening to this video. Okay, he turned it down. So spores are going to divide through mitosis, much like body cells, except they're only one end, right? All right. Ooh. I keep thinking it's done when he pauses and then it doesn't stop. It's like Rick James. Is that Rick James singing a turkey song? It is, isn't it? You ever see the Chappelle Show? Yeah, I can't make that comment. I'm Rick James. They have beaks. All right. You know, when you're eating like Thanksgiving dinner, though, I want you to think of like the Jurassic and the Triassic period, right? Because so you're basically eating a dinosaur, a Turkosaur, a Turkosaurus. Right? No? Turkosaurus with a can of gametophytes, because you got your cranberries, right? No? Can of fertilized zygotes? It doesn't, does it? Is this song almost done? Yep. Yay, it's over. Okay, so maybe it can be done now. It's okay. Okay. Okay, Rick James is over. Okay, I don't know if that is Rick James or not. So after our spores are basically our plant sperm, divide a bunch of times, they create something called a gametophyte. Okay, the gametophyte is going to go through more mitosis and produce single-celled gametes. And this is kind of where we get more and more like us in a way, okay? Because these gametes can be male or female, they can be pollen, or they can be eggs in ovaries. Now here's the thing. At the base of a flower, there's usually there is an ovary, and it can contain single eggs, or it contains sometimes thousands of eggs, okay? And so some plants have the ability to make many offspring all at the same time. We think of them as seeds, right? Now, if you've ever thought about breaking open, let's say, a dandelion, what is at the base? Has anybody ever done it, split a dandelion open and pulled all those little things out? Each of those is a flower, a single flower. Each of them is its own flower. Each little, like, strip. I won't draw it because it won't look anything like it, but each of those little yellow petals that you would think is a petal is actually its own flower. At the base of each of those is actually an ovary that, if pollinated, will become its own, in this case, zygote, and then that will divide to make a large sporophyte, right? So on trees, let's just think of pine trees. On pine trees, we have the large sporophyte. Let's walk through the cycle, which divides, obviously, and eventually it creates these structures that bud out and are going to eventually be cones, but first they're this flowering structure which create within them spores that will divide. Now, if they're the male spores, obviously they're going to develop into pollen. If they're and they're going to be involved in what is called a microspore. If they are a female, they're going to be a megaspore. The female is always the larger organ, right? Okay, because, I mean, that's where life starts. So it's always going to be the larger one. And so those will divide through mitosis. The gametophyte, there's usually a couple different types. I just talked about them, megaspore and microspore. Then they will divide from within, and when they divide, I'm talking about, of course, their gametes, the spore, the pollen, or the ovary, the eggs. And then they get either released or they wait for a visitor, right? So you ever notice how there's those big cones on the ground next to a pine tree that are opened up? Okay, those are the megaspores. You ever notice there's the small ones? Usually they're sticky. You know what I'm talking about? They're like a little smaller. We'll go pick some up Monday if you guys bring your warm clothes, and we'll check them out. But you really don't think about it. I never did really when I was younger. I didn't really think about the differences between the cone size. I was like, oh, those cones just didn't grow very big. That must be, you know, some are bigger than others, I used to think. But they're different. There's male and female. Now, I won't look, but how many of us knew already? Did you know already that there was a difference between, oh, my thing's not working, that there was a difference between male and female? And I won't look. Did you know that there was a difference between male and female cones? Or did you just assume that they were all the same? Yeah, and most of us don't. I wouldn't have known in high school. I wouldn't have had a clue. I'd be like, oh, it's just different sized cones. Yeah, right? I mean, that's okay. So what it looks like is this. As we go from the spore form all the way up to the gametophyte, you'll notice that you spend equal amounts of your time in each life cycle, so to speak. So we call it alternation of generations between being gametophytic and sporophytic. Sporophyte, of course, being the large structure, right, the diploid structure, whereas the gametophyte, down at the bottom, the gamete stage, the very small stage at the spore level, the one-end spore level, I should say, is very simple and small. But they spend equal times in each, and the plant or the organism itself is actually both. And so you can't really think of it being as just diploid or just being haploid. It alternates between generations. And you go, wait a minute, Mr. Mason. Most of the tree is diploid. And I would say, oh, really? What is the only living layer of a tree? The outer part, right? The inside is dead. It's called wood. Okay? It's past generations. So, and I'm talking, of course, about trees here, but most of the structure of a plant, if you look at it, has both generations depending on which stage it's in. Because that middle part of the tree isn't really doing anything. The outside is, even up to the root level. Well, once you get into the base of the roots, then of course. But up where the roots come in, the water, the xylem and phloem is coming to the outside of the tree. Now, some of that is flowing through the water, but it's all bringing it to the outside. It's just dead pipes. Okay, it's just bringing fluid and minerals up through all that dead xylem and phloem. Okay, and it's feeding that outer layer. So the terrestrial adaptations of land plants continued. The zygote and multicellular 2N embryo are retained and protected from desiccation. How are they protected? Well, they have a cuticle, right? Talked about that. The 2N sporophyte generation produces one or several sporangia. Sporangia, potato, potato. And then the sporangia produce spores by meiosis. We just saw this. Now, spores become the end gametophyte generation, which then bears multicellular gametangia. That's a fun one. Now, a male gametangium is an antheridium. And we'll talk more about anthers and filament later, but an anther is, of course, what the pollen attaches to, which is thought to be a vestigial, or not a vestigial, an ancestral organ of our flowers of today. Whereas a female gametangium is an archegonium. Archegonium. I'm sorry, say again? The pollen is the male gametophyte, which is made within the structure. So, oh, the anther is what holds the pollen. That's where it's produced from. We're actually going to look at some pollen. You'll see it up close, where you'll see where it, gosh, the best, this is kind of a weird analogy, but it's probably the easiest way for us to understand it. Imagine this as being synonymous to like a male testicle or a female ovary, right? And so imagine that you have a vas deferens that holds the, that attaches your testicle to a portion of the male reproductive system, which is very similar in a way to like the anther and the filament. The filament, of course, being the vessels that hold the testicle. In this case, we're referring to kind of as the anther, metaphorically. Now imagine it as that produces the sperm or pollen, the middle part is no longer going through division, and so it just holds it in place at that point, and it becomes dry and in a spore form pollen, right, that can then be taken or dropped off to a female egg or a stigma and dropped down into a pistil. We'll talk about that. We're going to go over all that anatomy with a flower. That gets into flowering plants a little bit later. But it is very interesting. That's why I say a flower is the most sexual organ probably out of any organism I can think of. Mainly because it has both parts. It's also why it's used as a metaphor when you teach small children about reproduction. So the green algal ancestors of plants, the additional terrestrial adaptations, they have a waxy cuticle to prevent water loss and stomata to allow gas exchange. That's the one thing I didn't talk about. I talked about how if you seal off the human body, we cannot control our heat or our fluid loss or gain. But the stoma and the stomata in plants do allow gas to be exchanged. Now the apical, the surface tissue, which has the ability to produce complex tissues and organs, is what I'm referring to here, and I'll show you that in a second. So if I ask you, how are gases exchanged, you would tell me through the stomata. So let's think about this. All day long, plants are going through photosynthesis. They're taking in CO2 and they're making oxygen. Well, how do they take in CO2 and how do they release oxygen? They do that through their stomata. It's like their mouth, right? So if we look close at plants, we understand that they have this cuticle layer on the apical surface that protects them from water loss. Now that would be fine, except for plants do have to get rid of the gases and bring new ones in. This is done through these little openings. They look like little slits, and they're called stomata. Now we will, actually we will next Monday or Tuesday if the plants are in, look at stomata underneath the microscope. We might even be able to see some chloroplasts doing their duty. I didn't mean duty as in poop. All right, I think that's enough for one day.